I was an Air Force F-16 pilot, and Ginger was an intel officer. And it was in France that we just started to learn about cider, about Calvados, about the whole idea of using apples to make these libations.
Hello, my name is Ria Wincaller, and I am the producer and cider MC of this weekly podcast, where we speak with makers, cider enthusiasts, and folks within the cider trade from around the world. Bringing us into this here episode, number 409 of Cider Chat, we heard from Scott Wierzbanowski of Olympic Bluffs Cidery and Lavender Farm, based in Washington State. And of course, as the name says, it's in the Olympic Peninsula, thus Olympic Bluffs. And the views from this farm are spectacular. And they're going to be telling you all about that, how they came from a military background, moved into cider making, and also a lavender farm. I'm super stoked about this because they were on the French cider tour. And if you remember in last week's episode, we had a little clip from the French cider tour, and that was with Scott and Ginger. And they're really cool. I'm going to say a little bit more before we get into that episode, but you're in for a treat. So stay tuned for that. Before we head to our featured conversation, as always, we have a wee bit of news from out and about in Ciderville. It's time for Who's Been Cross-Promoting Cider this past week between episode 408 and this year episode 409. And we have some really fun offerings to talk about. The first one goes out to the country of Denmark. It's considered the happiest place to live in the world. I just love hearing the passion, the enthusiasm, and the positivity that is coming from Denmark. And just this past week, Rakkerpak Cidery, and they call it It's Pure Nature in a Bottle. We love playing with apple cider and like to add Danish fruit for more exciting experiences for you. They do have a Facebook page. I highly recommend following Rakkerpak Cider, and did a post last week where they showed that they had posted the info flyer that they downloaded from the support page at ciderchat.com. And they posted on this particular page that they're doing what is called co-op crowdfunding for their cidery. So check it out. It was just a couple days ago at Rakkerpak Cidery. We are following them. Then we also saw from our friends at Heartland Cider Works, Alicio, who made a lovely cider called Avalon. I actually did a bottles on my desk about that particular cider. So if you want to check it out, I'll put a link in the show notes to that. But he posted the info flyer on his Instagram page for Heartland Cider Works. Hooray! We also saw Spacetime Mead and Cider Works once again shared the post as they always do. That's incredible. And of course, Know Your Roots, which was our featured guest on last week's episode 408, shared it both on their Instagram and their Facebook page that they were on the podcast, and used the hashtag XPromoteCider. I love it. And wouldn't you know, while I was just recording this piece for this here episode, I saw that Rakkerpak Cider wrote on the Cider Chat Facebook page because we shared their posting from their Facebook post. I mean, that's what cross-promotion is about. You know, you sharing is sharing it. You know, it's okay if it's redundant. It keeps cider in the news. That's the goal, right? Keep the conversation going. And Rakkerpak Cider wrote, yes, we surely work on hashtag cider going up in Denmark in our little cider club. They have a cider club and they have a cidery. And then it goes on with, Wednesday evening is the greatest evening to meet up because then we can discuss what we heard in the weekly cider chat. Oh, I'm going to start crying here. Of course, done while enjoying a good homemade cider in the glass. Yeah, that's what it's all about. So happy Sunset Cider Club to you, Denmark. Raise that glass. I want to hear some clinkings out there in the background. We love you, and thank you for sharing the good word about Cider Chat. That is what it is all about. We are just loving this. Hashtag XPromoteCider. It's all about keeping cider in the news. Oh, wait, there's more.
And everyone should have a cider chat. The podcasts, the Totally Cider tours, and the Cider Chat swag store. Ria has you covered. A veritable audible treasure trove. So go on and dig deep and support her. This is Tom Oliver from Oaklepitchard in Herefordshire in England.
Wow. And guess what? I have more of these sound bites from Tom. And don't you know, I'm going to be rolling them out every week. And I hope you do. Be like Tom Oliver and help support Cider Chat. There's a donate button at ciderchat.com, or join with other makers and cider enthusiasts out there and become a patron at the Cider Chat Patreon page. That's spelled Patreon. Google that and Cider Chat.
Walking through the orchards.
The French Cider Tour is rolling out this coming September to Paris, Normandy, and Brittany. This is a week-long cider tour where we both meet makers, we have cultural experiences, we picnic each day, we have a cider on the bus. Yes, we do. And, okay, also Calvados, Pommeau, and Poirier. And we also picnic at castles and have a ton of fun. And who better to tell you about it than a past guest on the tour? So let's roll to this audio snapshot from a past French cider tour.
First of all, I want to say thank you to you, Ria, for being such an excellent host and tour guide and tour assembler. The way you put together this journey was really surprising, because we got to meet so many different kinds of people they're the experts in their region. They're thinking about passing on the tradition, and it's their cultural heritage. And I'm not a cider maker, I'm a consumer, but I am someone who studies generations of traditional culture producers. And so if you don't have someone to carry on the tradition, like your children or other folks who are interested, young generations, the traditions don't often live on and change with the times. So I've learned so much about that in these regions, and I would never have known how much cider making is a part of the French culture. I really didn't know much about it at all, so I'm still learning so much. I want to learn more. The tastings were eye-opening. Bryce makes cider at home. I still love his ciders, but I haven't had a chance to really sample ciders from France, and so the terroir is so different. I can't say enough great things about this tour. I would encourage anyone, even if you don't think you like or know cider, to come on the tour, because you will have such a great time. It was just also fun and relaxing, and your vibe is really inclusive and inviting, and we can ask questions. We were all free to be ourselves, and also I think you attract a very specific kind of group where people are open-minded, they are kind to each other, want to hang out with each other. It's one of the more social groups I've ever been on tour with. Not that I've done tons of tour, but I've done tons of travel, who want to hang out with each other from day one. And that is no doubt because of the way you constructed the tour, encouraged us to just be in the zone, as you say. I really loved the pacing of the tour and the way you put in cultural experiences. I mean, the cider making, no doubt, is a cultural experience unto itself, but other than cider, we got to see chateaus, the countryside. We got to spend time in cafes, in pubs, just enjoying the scenery, enjoying the food. Really different towns, many different towns. That was wonderful. And we also didn't have to get up at 6 a.m. Sometimes I thought 9 was so reasonable, and 8:45, that's a great
departure time.
That was Debbie, a cider enthusiast from Santa Cruz, California. You too can be on the French Cider Tour coming up this September. Go to the Totally Cider page at ciderchat.com and secure your reservation today.
Smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet.
up next is our featured conversation with Ginger and Scott Wierzbanowski of Olympic Bluffs Cidery and Lavender Farm. They're based on the Olympic Peninsula on the northern edge there in Port Angeles. You're going to be hearing all about that and their backstory, what they're doing, and why this is a dream vacation destination. I mean, just one look at the photos will make you go gaga. I know it does for me. To the east, you could see Mount Baker, which is over 10,000 feet tall. And to the north, it is Victoria in Canada. So they're right on the water there, right on the Salish Sea, where there's orca whales, and it's on a bluff. So it is on the shoreline. Absolutely spectacular. They have a lot going on there. Some new additions to the cidery and lavender farm. Again, destination, which is why I'm inviting you to grab a glass and join this chat with Ginger and Scott Wierzbanowski of Olympic Bluffs Cidery and Lavender Farm, based in Port Angeles in Washington State.
We were both in the Air Force. We met many years ago in the 95, 96 time frame in Korea. And I was an Air Force F-16 pilot, and Ginger was an intel officer. And we met, dated, eventually got married in Denmark, and then spent quite a few years in Europe, and then came back to the States, and then spent some more time in Europe when I was doing an exchange program in France. But it was in France that we just started to learn about cider, about Calvados, about the whole idea of using apples to make these libations.
We traveled a lot as veterans and all around the U.S., but a lot of time in Europe. And we were sent on one temporary duty assignment to the 60th anniversary of D-Day. There, Scott and I are both French speakers. We were there as interpreters for or between the U.S. and U.S. forces and the French. So while there, we stayed in a gîte, so a little hotel, and the owners served us Calvados. And we were like, whoa, we need to make this. And Scott's a cook and a maker, and so that just resonated with both of us. And then years later, in the basement of our house in D.C., after traveling up into the Shenandoah Mountains to get a lot of cider, we tried our hand at cider making, and I loved it, and he was excited, and we've made cheese, we made all sorts of different things, but that was just fun for us, and that was the spark at the beginning of the cider journey.
So that kind of gave us an idea of what was fun for as a hobby. Right? Something new, working with the apples, using, at the time, champagne yeast, and coming up with something that really turned out quite well. But there's no agriculture in our background whatsoever. And so when we retired from the Air Force, we started doing our jobs in the D.C. area, working with corporate and different agencies. We did that up to a point where we had a decision to what we're going to do with our lives. And we could have kept on doing the same thing in the aerospace world or pivot. And for us, the timing was perfect. So we made the leap, left the East Coast, went to the West Coast, where we had some property on the Olympic Peninsula, and decided that we wanted to start up a small cidery with the thought process that, hey, we'll do this for a couple of years, and if it doesn't work out, we could always go back to our other lives. But here we are, almost 4 years later, really enjoying ourselves, knowing that going back is really not an option for us anymore.
A totally different world.
Oh, it is. It is a different world where instead of waking up at 4:55 in the morning so that you can go do your workout before you go into work, so you can have some time with the kids at the end of the day, we wake up with the sun, decide what we're going to do for the day, and then start the day either in the orchard or the lavender farm or parts of the cidery, depending upon what we're building up. And it's a different mindset, different types of people, different culture, a different pace of life. It is something that I've never really dealt with before, but it's really pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I love the partnership in it. We have met so many amazing people, you included, but just along the way, as we need to learn something, whether it's fellow cider makers or businesses or the people that actually come out to drill so we can get water to the cidery and who test different things on the property. Each one of those has played just this incredible role. And so we feel like we're building a community, building up community while we're there and strengthening our own community. And to me, that's been extraordinarily fun.
All right, so we got to go back a little bit here.
Okay, sure.
So let's go back to November of 2020. Beforehand, we'd known about your cider chat, right? We were looking online, trying to find something when we decided that we wanted to go down this path, and there's really nothing out there. And we started listening to cider chat, and it was really an interesting way to get an idea of what cider chat was, or what cider was like. But we still had this question, which was, how do you start up a cidery? And so remember back in November of 2020, we sent you a note, a letter, an email basically saying, we're new at this, we love what you're doing here, help us. How do we start doing this? And where do we go and what do we learn from? And that kind of started our relationship with you. You connected us with a couple of cideries. We started talking to Finn River. We talked with Dragon's Head. And then you started up a mini-series that was
How to start a cidery.
How to start a cidery. And that was absolutely perfect for us as we were trying to understand the intricacies of what type of barrels do you use, or tanks, or hoses, or pumps. And we met, even this week, we met individuals who are at about the same level as we are in terms of starting our cidery, who asked those questions of, I wish there was a book for dummies on how to use this equipment, because it doesn't come with instruction manuals, and you don't know how to use a T-clamp in order to connect a hose to a pump, or what you have to do to prime to get it to the tank, or what size tank and I like to use. So that kind of started us up down this path. And it's been a hunt, if you will, for all the different types of information that we need in order to get this cidery started, whether it's the business plan or the type of equipment, or even what type of cider we want to be able to produce, or what we want our experience to be with the customers who come and visit our place.
And it was episode 249. In case anyone's wondering, and I'll never forget it. I'm like, they're reading our letter. And it was pretty exciting. And I love the fact that along the way, you'll get this kind of errant email from me. Rhea, I need to know about X or Y. And you just open that amazing Rolodex and go, oh, have you thought of this? No. That has been exceptionally fun to know that someone's out there, that this touch point that you can go to along the way.
Yay. Oh, that makes my heart swell. I love it. Here you are years later, we're in 2024. Why Washington State? And I think I asked you this on the tour, but I think there's a reason. You're not originally from Washington State, or are you? One of you is.
I was born there, early years there, spent most of my from 8th grade on in Alaska. So I consider Washington State part of my homeland.
But you lived out there in the world pretty far, and you were on the East Coast, right, around D.C. area for many years. But there was something that brought you up to Port Angeles.
It was the 2013, probably in February, I don't even know, I need to get the issue, but Sunset Magazine, which is a big magazine on the West Coast, it's all West Coast focus, and Scott's mom had sent it to me forever. But so delivered to our Washington, D.C. home, we got this magazine, and it had this trek all over the Olympic Peninsula, visit the mountains, and so we pretty much followed all of their advice and went all over, but at the same time, I had heard about, or someone had told me about the Lavender Festival. So we timed it at the third week of July with this major Lavender Festival, which then we'd later become a part of. And so we followed that. While we were there, Scott definitely admonished me and said, we are not buying anything while we're there, house, land, or anything. And then on day 7 of that 12-day trip, we bought a house and land.
Yes, that's exactly what happened. But I got to say, the weather is gorgeous. They have the rain shadow, which is the blue skies, which is what I was looking for. And it's this confluence of the mountains, the plains, the ocean, the high bluffs, which is where Olympic Bluffs Cidery comes from, that just put it all together. And for us to never have roots anywhere and decide, well, for right now, why don't we go ahead and put our roots here and see what happens, is really how it all started for how we got there. And then as we continued to visit and continued to live our lives there, this is where we found out that this was a place to call home, at least for now. Right? We'll see what happens in the next decade or two, but right now, this is a perfect place for us.
A lot could happen in 10 years.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when Scott says high bluffs, we didn't have a clear understanding of that when we were visiting property, when I drug him out with a real estate agent. We thought high bluffs meant 15 feet off the water. In fact, it's 150-ish feet off the water, and we almost, had an incident because there's no railings. And so yeah, it's definitely, you sit high. You're looking straight at Victoria from our property, straight of Juan de Fuca. If we look to the right, we have Mount Baker looming, which is very far away, but looks very close. And then behind us, to the south, the entire Olympic mountain range. So it's quite lovely.
Spectacular. Wow. Flat land leading right up to the bluff, right? And I really want to encourage listeners out there in Ciderville to follow their Instagram account, because you get to see these photos, of what you're seeing. I remember when meeting you and you were talking about, I just love to sit out there and look at the skyline and out towards the sea. Not many people have that, and to be able to have a location where people can visit and go there. So let's talk a little bit about that location, and in terms of soil, terrain, what you have there.
All right. Where we're located it's in glacial till, right? So where the Strait of Juan de Fuca is and where the high bluffs are, old glaciers used to come on by. The land that we're on is out of sandy loam. Very few rocks where we happen to be, which was great for when we were planting. There's a little bit of clay. However, drainage for the apple trees is just about perfect. So we have no issues in terms of that. Flat lands, it used to be prairie lands, and they would harvest the grass and the hay over there beforehand. So when we had the soil tested, we looked at nearly zero nitrogen in the soil, not so much organic material other than that top couple of inches, and the pH was slightly acidic, about 5.8 or so. All that worked out pretty well in terms of having us plant both the apple trees and the lavender plants. So minimal intervention other than adding, what do we add to the trees in terms of?
It was Hendricus.
Yeah.
And then what else did I add?
Mycorrhizate.
Yeah, mycorrhizate.
Those are the two, and then we supplemented with a little bit of calcium just to bring everything up to what we thought would be a happy environment for the trees. And we did that both for the apple trees and the lavender plants, and basically they've taken off. Our only problem with the lavender plants are the little dang moles that like to push out our lavender plants.
When they were little, we planted them. They were we planted 3,478 lavender plants, and they were all about an inch tall. So a lot of hands and knees action.
That is a lot of hands. Is there one particular...
And we put bone meal in it.
And bone meal. Yeah. Is there one particular variety of lavender that you selected?
So we selected... Scott's an engineer by education, so there was a lot of science to it. But we selected...
11 different types.
11 types.
Okay.
But the main types were Grosso for oil production and Royal Velvet for culinary.
For culinary.
And then we had a bunch of other ones for color that were both culinary and oil that we mixed in together.
It just feels so gourmet to me, having a lavender farm and an orchard there. Just looking at the colors over the course of the year must be just dreamy.
It's stunning. Right? It's stunning. And what was really crazy is you have all these, so you have purples and whites and light purple and pink. And then behind, I guess it's north of our lavender building, there's a sea of yellow. And I don't know what it is about it. People came in during lavender weekend, and all they could see is this glistening yellow in the back. They ignored all the lavender, and they're like, what is that? And I'm like, dandelions. And they're like, did you plant it? I'm like, no. So it also has these other contrasts. And Scott and I also grow wheat and rye. So we partner with Washington State University's Bread Lab, another great Instagram account. They're just doing amazing things. And they're helping small-sized farmers all around the state of Washington reestablish ancient grains and grains that are specifically made for a maritime climate. So we partner with them and grow a lot of wheat and rye. So when you're looking at the property, it's just delightful in terms of what you're seeing and what you're experiencing.
Yeah. Now, a lot is a relative term. A half an acre. This is not tens of thousands of acres. It's enough that we can maybe do by hand, and it brings a different character to the property.
Yeah.
And so our property is really set for people to come visit, which is really cool. And we're getting to that point. The lavender farm has just opened. Cidery will be open hopefully this spring. And we really do want to be able to share the experiences there, which is what we love about the place.
Yeah. I want to get a little bit more into that.
Sure.
But let's first go back to the apples a little bit. So you planted a bunch of apples. With all your travels, with your tasting here and there, what was your decision there for the varieties and in terms of the styles that you want to be making
All right.
for cider?
So that was a very difficult decision, and I'm sure
sure
we've
it
got a
is.
lot of it wrong.
No.
But what we wanted to do was give ourselves a little bit of flexibility. A lot of choices. First choice was whether or not we wanted to do dwarf trees or semi-dwarf trees.
Yeah.
And in the spirit of trying to stay sustainable and responsible, we really decided to go with the semi-dwarf trees, acknowledging the fact that it's going to be more work. We're going to have...
longer.
It's going to take longer. We're going to have to bring more people in for harvesting. But it fits with the pictures that we imagine in our mind as to what an orchard looked like. And as time goes forward, we're starting to see other orchardists go more towards the semi-dwarf trees as opposed to the dwarf trees when that becomes a priority. If it's still for producing apples, there's a serious, definite case to be made about using dwarf trees. So we decided on the semi-dwarf trees. We decided on our spacing, and we had these conversations too, is what's the right spacing in between the rows and the columns, and we decided with our semi-dwarf trees and for the rootstock M111s, M106s, we went to the Genevas, 890s and 935s, and a smattering of whatever we can get from different nurseries, cider apple nurseries around the country. We decided on about 15 to 16 feet separation both in our rows and our columns. And it works out pretty well for what we're dealing with right now. We'll see what happens in 5 years when these trees become much larger than they are. But it's a good start. When it comes to the types of trees, we know that Washington State has lots of apples, especially culinary, sweet apples, dessert apples, and the like. And we know that we can make good cider with that. But what we wanted to be able to focus on, because we had the land, was to bring in cider apples, specifically apples that you can't normally find within the commercial area. So if you were to take a look at we have about 480 trees in our 3-acre orchard, plus about another 80 trees where we live. And in those 480 trees, there's 5 different large amounts. We have Harrison, we have Kingston Black, we have Virginia Hughes Crab, Brown Snout.
Northern Spy.
Oh, definitely Northern Spy. Antonovka is an apple that Ginger wanted to bring in at the last minute.
Antonovka, wow, that's exciting.
Yes.
I'm responsible.
It wasn't my choice, but she wins on this one.
Well, you love the name.
Yes.
And thanks to Dragonhead, who told us about Puget Spice crab apples, which I just love the flavor that they bring to cider. We have quite a few Puget Spice as well.
Yep,
so.
and Dabinets.
And Dabinets.
And Arkansas Black. So
Harrison's. Did you
yeah,
get
we got
Harrison's?
those. So those, let's just say those are about 10 of the largest amounts that we have. And then we have a couple of rows that are, the rows of misfit toys and apples that just pop up because we have friends and neighbors, or you find something really interesting at a market and you decide to plant it in one particular row.
We've been warned to not do that, but we did it anyway, and Scott calls it Ginger's row of misfit toys.
So we planted most of those about 3 years ago, and they're just producing right now. So this year we pulled off about enough to produce 60 gallons of cider from our orchard, and that in conjunction with about another 600 gallons of juice that we were able to get from friends, from local farms, from a community press that we do. Every year we do a community press where anyone in the local area can bring their apples to our location. They press them, or we press the apples. They can keep the juice or leave the juice with us. If we keep the juice, we make it into cider for the next year. So this was our second year. This last fall of 23 was our second year of doing that, which was great because then all the community was able to taste the cider that we produced from their apples from the previous year. And now we got this new community activity that we're doing with the local area that just really makes sense.
It is the coolest. The first time we did it, 200 people arrived on our property, and we served them. We didn't have our own cider the first year, but we served them food. We did bratwurst. We did all this. We co-hosted it with our very close friends, 2 other couples, and brought all these people together, and they brought all their apples, and I went to the local creamery and got plastic half gallons. So if they wanted to take their juice back, they could, because a lot of people don't have that machinery.
Right.
So it just created this just amazing community event. It was a little bit fishes and loaves with food. Everybody showed up with food as well. So, and then this year, same kind of thing, even more people, different kind of crowd. And we were, obviously the cider was full up and running at that point, cidery, in terms of the structure and the electricity and building and all that. So it was even better this year in many ways. So it was neat. And people find out about us and start delivering apples. So we get apples from all over the local community, or we go pick them. They say, hey, I have quince, I have this kind of apple, and we go out and have a little bit of fun.
Yeah, so you're sourcing from the local community and you have your own orchard. You're not selling your cider yet, so what is the ballpark plan for that?
Yes, this is the trials and tribulations of starting up a small business, dealing with county regulations, city regulations, all the stuff that you just don't understand until you start it.
Yes.
We wanted to be stood up, last August. Last fall was the plan. We just kept on hitting roadblock upon roadblock of things that just needed to be accomplished. We were very close. Basically, everything is ready. All of our fermentation tanks are there. The electricity is there. The power is there. Everything's ready to go. But we don't have water, the appropriate type of water that we need in order to be able to run a safe and sustainable cidery.
To be permitted stuff.
Right, and now we have the blessing from both public utilities and the county. It's basically just 400 feet from the terminus of the water that we needed to get, so we didn't think it would be that difficult, but there were obstacles, and I think we've basically overcome most all of them that we're aware of right now. So
our plan is
confident.
So our plan is to have everything up and running hopefully by early spring. So what are we at in January, February, March? Probably March is when we will have everything in line that we could actually start. Not so much producing, because we're doing that in terms of test cases, but actually beginning to sell our cider and open up to the community.
Just to give listeners an idea, you have this beautiful stretch of land. There is a current building on there, and that is where you are now selling lavender products, right? And that will also be where you'll sell the cider too eventually? No.
So close.
Let's take that next jump here, because we got to know how to get the cider, man. I got to know. Let's get to the bones. Nuts and bolts. There's one thing. Get me to the cider.
We have 20 acres of land, which is great where we're located. And we divvied up that land in sections, if you will. The left-hand side of the property on the west side is where we have the lavender farm, the lavender shop, and all of our lavender plants. And that is up and running. It's operational right now. People show up during the lavender season, even off-season, in order to just enjoy that experience. On the east side of the property, on the other side of the driveway, is where we have the orchard and the lavender
processing building.
Cider processing building. And that's where we will be doing all the processing, and we will start our sales there as well. And then once we get ourselves up and running, the intent is to have a tasting room built, which will be next to the cider processing facility. That will be more comfortable than having a not so much a shack, but
we have basically we segmented off a section of the cidery to be able to serve cider, and then there's a cider garden that we created in order to basically get our alcohol license. So that's all segmented off, and people can be in that cider garden to drink cider now. They can drink it inside and do, but in the future when we're selling it, we will probably, if we are not prepared with a big tasting space and there's inclement weather, we'll have to either come up with a different plan.
Yeah. What I think is really interesting about your model, and for folks who are thinking about getting into cider, is you've really approached it in a couple directions, actually, when I think about it. But one, very methodical on your steps that you've been taking, getting the land, getting the infrastructure really set up, and then some, because you've really stretched your arm way out here. Because not only do you have a cider, you have a lavender farm, which is not so unusual because farmers are doing multi-value-added products. But you've also taken on some extracurricular activities too. So let's dive into that and talk about like the much bigger scope of this, because I think that is, folks listening might want to get a sense of, and also location, because you are the only cidery up in that area. The geography of that, if you're looking at Washington State, you're in the western quadrant in the most like furthest point out is the Olympic point of the peninsula, where there's like little puffins, right? Little puffins, which I have seen, which is incredible to go and visit. It's an Indian reservation.
Yeah, Nia Bay.
Yeah. And then you come to the west, so you're riding along the upper coast of the Olympic Peninsula, and then you come into your town, Port Angeles. There is not really a cidery very close by, but you are circled around to the north up there in Seattle, to the south. Washington is a huge apple state, but you chose this location, and now you're branching out. So that's my intro to it. Take it away. Tell us what the heck is going on, because I am like through the moon on this one. This is wild.
So the vision is that it's a destination. Not only is it a cidery, although that's the biggest pillar, it's the biggest part of it, but I imagine you're coming to the peninsula, you want to see Hurricane Ridge and all these majestic, beautiful mountains, the whole rainforest. Take a trip to Victoria on a ferry, but on your way, you stop by and you see us. So when you approach our property, giant orchard, as Scott said, to the east, the lavender fields and wheat fields to the west. And then as you're going north on the property, it's all ocean vistas. And
Orcas breaching
Orcas,
in the sunset.
exactly.
They have,
Eagles flying from the trees.
rainbow water spouts, because I've seen that on Instagram. Are we in the land of Oz or what?
Yeah, and then one of the main reasons why we bought that property was that it has access to the beach. So so many people along the bluff have no way to get to the beach. So we basically have a private beach, 150 some steps down to the beach, with a little drawbridge at the end.
Is it cold? Is it brisk?
Right now it is.
Right now,
Yeah,
right
sure.
now it is.
Everything's
But in the
cold now.
summer, it's stunning.
Wow.
And you can go for long walks down
My
there,
goodness.
and it's just beautiful. So that was one of the things that drew us to it. One of the many.
Then I guess you could say the final pillar that we have with respect to what we're dealing with the property is there's a bed and breakfast that is tied to our property right now. And it is basically
Kind of tied. It's tied to your property.
It is. It
It's
is.
right next door to it.
It's right next door. It's inside,
of it.
the
Okay.
20 acres.
Yeah.
And that was like the final thing, I think, that kind of brought this all together in terms of truly trying to find this destination, this experience where it's not a large bed and breakfast, but it allows people who want to be able to stay there and then be able to tie into the rest of the community and all the experiences that you can have in that local area.
But there's another piece here too, because there's another
Building.
spot.
Okay,
This is like the slow wake, like the wave is coming in.
All right,
Right?
so,
The wave is coming in.
let's go from just
Okay.
really
Delving
quickly in
into our
terms of from a business case perspective. This
Right.
is probably not the best way to do this in terms of
Or not,
if you build it, they
really.
will come possibly, right? I probably would have been a little bit more risk adverse doing this, but when we work together as a team between Ginger and I, especially because of her ability to sniff out those very good business deals, a lot of these things turned out, and it makes sense as we move forward. But a lot rides on how well we produce our cider, how the customers and the visitors appreciate and take our whole experience into mind as they decide to visit us. So the final part of this, I guess you could say, is when we were building our property, or building the cider production facility, we were looking at trying to build the tasting room at about the same time. However, during this time of the year, or these times of the years, the prices that came back were threefold as to what we expected them to be, which really blew us out of the water. And during that time, Ginger said, we should just go buy a piece of commercial property for that same amount of money. And I'm like, no,
It
we're
was
not
just
going
like
to
that
really
too.
do
With
that.
that attitude, it was absolutely. I think there was a foot stomp in there.
And I go, fine, we'll go look, but we're not going to buy anything. We're just going to go
Famous
look.
last words.
And what we did was we did find a piece of property down in Port Angeles that already had tenants. And it was one of those things where we looked at the potential
Yeah.
of, as we continue to grow, we have the land that's in between two large cities, or two small cities, if you will, but it's in between the cities, and it's a destination to go to. We decided that if we had a footprint in the downtown area where the ferry comes in from Victoria, where most of the people who are visiting the Olympic Peninsula goes through and at least stops for dinner and for breakfast and all those types of things in order to visit the area, to have a presence in town made sense. And we have the flexibility of, if we want to, we can continue to make cider and then be able to sell it there in the town. But if we don't want to sell it there in the town, we can flip and have tenants in there. And so from our perspective, it works out both ways. It gives us an option that we would not have had unless we actually went down this path.
So we're lucky that, I guess, that the tasting room came back out of scope for what we wanted, because then we just started imagining what's possible. The other advantage to that is that it's encouraged us to become more a part of Port Angeles. We were always leaning towards Sequim, the other city, at the beginning, and then as we grew into that spot, started to renovate that commercial building and put in one of the new renters, it was as if we catapulted into just this sisterhood and brotherhood in the city, and we learned, and then all of these connections started happening, and I feel like we've grown so much as a couple and as a business, I guess, couple, as a partnership, but a lot of that has been through that building and through it just pushing us into the city to experience and to fight for better things in that city. So now we're more of a responsible entity in making Port Angeles better, stronger, even more beautiful.
And who doesn't want that? Yeah.
Right.
So interesting point to that. Everyone should start off with their business plans. Right? Set up with what you want to do, what you aspire to do, with your vision and your mission and your objectives. But realize that is a living document. If you took a look at our first version, our first draft of this, nowhere on there were we planning on having a bed and breakfast, and nowhere on there were we planning on doing anything in terms of a commercial building. But when opportunities arise, you have to be able to flex. And then take into consideration all the different options for achieving whatever that final goal happens to be. And for us, it's threefold, right? It's producing very good cider that we are starting to do now with our test batches. It is having people come and enjoy and experience our local area. And then for us, it's also to give back to the community and be part of the community. And as long as we have those three kind of objectives or in our mission, all the things that happen between here and there don't really matter as long as you're going towards that end state.
That was probably the first thing we wrote as part of our business plan was, what are the foundational pillars? What do you want to achieve? And great cider, build and strengthen the community, and make it a place people really can come and enjoy themselves. And I think those were the three things that we started with, and that hasn't changed.
No, it hasn't. It really hasn't.
That's fantastic. That's your mission right there. A solid mission statement is like the backbone of any organization. I can't help but think that all your life journeys up to this point have given you that fortitude to step into some tenuous situations here. Like, it's one thing to have one focused product, but now you have multi-products on the line here that are bigger and bigger. Cider's one thing, and then running a B&B. So the two of you working together, and you're obviously pretty darn powerful in your own right. You have a knowledge bank that's following you from your life history. But how do you manage that? And is this a bigger team than the two of you?
That is a very interesting question. In the grand scheme of things, yes, it is a bigger team than us, and it's the team that we reach out to within the community. And Ginger alluded to that beforehand. I'll start off to say, but right now it's Ginger and I, and the way we're moving forward is we need to be able to experience these things, how to make the cider, how to weed the weeds in the lavender farm, how to eventually run a bed and breakfast and the like at the grassroots level. Once we understand the issues, then we'll bring in people as appropriate so that we can grow in a smart, sustainable way. When it comes to how we bring in the rest of the community to help us, it's the plumbers and the excavators and the city of the commerce bureau, what is that, the Chamber of Commerce, and all these other individuals and groups within our community that really have stepped up to help us in terms of teaching us how to. I'll give you a very great example. Is when we were building the orchard, we come from the city, we don't know how to drive a tractor, we don't know how to build a fence, and there's a local farm store.
Wow, wait a minute. Let's just all take a pause there. Okay, so, And they're still doing it, Ciderville, okay? They're in it. And you can feel like there's a bit of joy in the room. I wish you were all sitting in the room right now because it's like electric happiness. But yeah, you're from the city. You've planted trees. You've been raising lavender. You're making incredible lavender products. Holy smokes.
YouTube University is amazing. And there's a couple of individuals at some of the stores who took pity on us, came over to our place,
people.
showed us how to drive a tractor, showed us how to put up a fence properly without hurting ourselves or breaking the fence.
Good. Wow.
How to plant.
The co-op, Leeds Farm,
Right.
and they have even WSU as a co-op in terms of, does this tree look okay to you? Is this not looking good?
So it's the resources and trying to find those resources and understanding that you can't do it all by yourself. Mm-hmm. And then we play off of each other's strengths between Ginger and I. Ginger is very much the businesswoman, and so she's always looking for those incremental steps that we can take that will, advance us as a business. And then I'm more of the methodical engineer type in terms of, okay, if we want to do this in a smart way that doesn't need 18 people, let's make sure that we've lined these up properly and that we have an irrigation system that's on timers so that we don't have to water everything, or that we set up the place, the plants and everything else in an appealing way so that when people show up here, it wants them to wander into different areas. And that design, I think, is very important to us. And we still make mistakes. We look at certain things that we've done going, we probably shouldn't have done it that way, and these are the reasons why. And so one day, we'll write this all down for someone else to be able to learn from our experiences, but the trial runs. Having that flexibility, understanding that you are going to make mistakes, and not get yourself going down a path that is irrevocable, right? You can't turn around. You always have to have an out. And that's what we've tried to build into the business plan, and everything that we're doing is that flexibility, right? We have a term, flexibility is the key to air power. That is part of the Air Force, and that has really driven the way that we've done things, is understanding that you're not going to get it right, and you got to be flexible.
Yeah, that's a great motto. What I feel from the two of you is that you're enjoying the ride. It's not, some people come into cider because they want to make cider and they enjoy cider. Some come in because and this is more like a couple of years ago, they're thinking, quick way to make money, right? I'm going to be able to, because cider's going gangbusters right now, and I'm going to be able to make some money. But what I felt by getting to know the two of you over the past couple of years is you're just in this journey. Like, the part of your business is not just the final product, but it's the whole scope of the journey. And peeling that away, learning that process, and building upon your own education is really the whole part of the business. Is that true, or is that just like my feel-good piece of it?
No,
because it's contagious. You're just like, wow, it sounds so fun, this stepping out and super duper risks that you're doing here, no doubt. But at the same time, I just feel so confident that it's going to work, because it's not just about the end game, it's the enjoying the side of the mountain while you're climbing it.
Right.
Yeah. When we made some of the decisions, we're sitting in our comfy home in Northern Virginia, D.C. area, and I look back and I imagine us sitting in our living room or in our study, and we're ordering plants and ordering trees and doing all these things. We had the benefit of being home a little bit more because of COVID. And we had a book called Don't Retire, Rewire. And the best way for Scott and I to read a book together is he's driving and I read it out loud.
Aww,
and so
cute.
we don't do that very often. We did that with one parenting book and this book. But we read this book and it forced us, and then I got this little empty notebook and wrote out, what do we want to learn? Where do we want to travel? What do we want to do? Now, we've learned a lot of things. Never dreamt we'd make a fence that is 1,600 linear feet and prevents deer from crashing through, and have a little bit of PTSD from that fence. But anyway, I think we learned so much along the way. And whenever we hit something, when we hit some sort of obstacle or barrier, we obviously, like any normal human, there's some frustration, but when we get through it, being able to look back and know that you learned, that you're stronger, that you'll be able to use that in the future or help somebody else. So that, for me, that's super exciting. What about you? What do you?
I wish it wasn't as hard as it was. It would have been
pragmatic,
nice if we were able to just go through one shot and get it all right, and have been producing cider for the last 2
We
years.
definitely thought it would be easier.
Yeah.
But you're right, it is a journey, and who knows what will happen, right? We go down this path, we have our outs, if you will, but we also are doing this at a time when we know we can do that. We got out of the corporate world at a young enough age that we could actually be on our hands and knees and dig in the holes and doing the weeding. And if we tried to do that when we were 65, 70 years old, it was never going to happen. So we decided to take that plunge early when we knew our bodies could handle it. That was one key reason.
Sure.
And then we'll see. This, for us, has been a great experience. We're learning a lot. We're just at the cusp of actually starting our operations now. We've done a lot of the test batches. We've gotten feedback from the community as to what they like. And that's a whole new story, too, that we could talk about here in just a second. But understanding what the customer wants versus what you would like to do, while it's great to be going down the same path, sometimes they are in different paths, and you have to make those decisions.
And it's hard both on the lavender product side, because I have probably about 100 products. And when I first started creating them and making them and doing all these things, putting yourself out there is
different kind
it's
of
a little
marketing,
intimidating. It's one thing when I'm at a defense company and I'm selling their product, but this is my product, and I made that, and I want people to like it, and I want it to go well. And for the most part, it has. I've seen some mistakes along the way. I know I'm definitely experienced, errors, but and I think Scott is, now that we're giving a lot of tastings and getting that feedback, I love how he asks questions all the time. What do you think of this? Or how he explains. We have 6 different apples from the orchard, all different types, and has people try them, then has people try the ciders, and basically does this education along with the cider making and cider tasting. It's just been a great ride. It's been fun.
So let's get back to what you said about the community and their sense of cider and what you're learning there.
So if you look in our community, we are the only cidery within about 45 minutes to an hour away. Over in the Port Townsend area, we have some great cideries. We have Finn River, Alpenfire, Eagle Mount. Let's see, there's a couple other ones out there.
Vashon
has Dragon's Head, and then you have Victoria in British Columbia that has 2 or 3.
Sea cider.
But there are none within our area. And so when we talk to the community, they're like, yes, we need something close to us so that we don't have to go so far away. And there's this level of excitement. When you look at the types of cider that Ginger and I like, as you'll find with most cider makers, they tend to be more dry, more vintage in terms of what you're producing, things that are a little bit more nuanced and complex, which is why we have these cider apples that we do that are high in tannins. Most of them are higher in tannins than you would find with your other things. And those are fun to play with. But I understand the fact that doesn't necessarily mean everyone else is going to like that. So when we've been doing our testing with the customers, with our customers in our community, with the test batches that we made from last year, it's really to find out what they like too. Dry ciders towards the semi-sweet. I haven't gotten any further than semi-sweet, and I think we're pretty content with that semi-dry, semi-sweet to dry type ciders. 2 paths is what we're planning on taking. With the cider apples that we have in our orchard, those will most likely be produced in 750 milliliter bottles. They'll be aged 6 months, 9 months, and think of them on a yearly schedule. With some of those apples, as well as the community apples that we get from the local area, those will probably going to be turned a little bit quicker, and those will be more American style, if you will, more appealing to the community and what they are looking for. They love the berry ciders that we make, and some of the adjuncts. The hopped cider is interesting to them. More sweet than dry are things that a lot of the customers have come back to. Now, when they say sweet, when I say sweet, it's not sickly sweet. If you take a look at some of the sweet ciders that we're making, they are definitely less than you would find from the other ciders around here. And that's where we're being influenced by the customers, but not going completely away from some of the ideas that we want to be able to go down. But I understand that these 2 paths, I think, are necessary, at least for us right now, as we're starting up and trying to build up our customer base to have a successful business. And once we're successful, we have one of 2 options. We could either slowly bring the customers towards our side in terms of ciders, or understand that there would be this logical break. We're not quite there yet, but we're having fun doing these different types of ciders to understand both what we like and what other people like.
Yeah, and integrating the lavender.
So we do. We have done one cider that Ginger can talk to on that one.
So we have a berry that grows on the peninsula and also over on Vancouver Island, and it's called, you'll see it in floral arrangements as the greenery. It's the salal plant, Salal. So we've been using those berries, and they have a nice earthy berry taste. And then we took my culinary royal velvet culinary lavender and had that in a cider, and then we basically married those two till we got to the point where it was perfect, or in our minds perfect, and then we tested it out on people, and it went well. We're excited about that. We've also spent some time with a couple different local foragers. So we're looking at fir tips, spruce tips, all different types of berries, things that we can find that'll set us apart.
Our local honey too.
Oh, and we forgot about that. We have a 4-hive apiary, and so we have bees and our own honey, so we can use that as we
Little
need to.
sizer or?
So we've done both. So actually, that was the very first thing we made back in Virginia was a sizer. Before I even knew what a sizer was, right? It was, we had the apples. I had some idea that I wanted to bring the alcohol level up, and I knew that sugar would be able to do that. But we decided to throw in a bunch of honey into that first batch that we made with the champagne yeast. And we probably brought that up to 9.5% alcohol without really realizing what we were doing. But it turned out great. And then we found out later that what we made was actually a sizer. We'll go both ways on that. We'll be doing sizers. We'll probably back sweeten some of our drinks with honey as opposed to the sugar or the juices. This is the year of experimentation. This is a year of trying to find out what works and then come up with a selection of probably 5 to 7 different types of ciders that we'll be bringing out the following year.
And then quince.
Quince was fun.
We have quince that we grow, just a couple trees. And this year, an older woman called us and basically said, I have quince. I have an old quince tree, and I have a lot of quince. She's actually an author. We ended up at her house for a couple hours, touring the grounds and coming home with about 400 pounds of quince.
Which wreaks havoc on your grinder. We're trying to figure out how to deal with that one. We've heard of freezing the quince or just chopping them up or cooking it.
Or maybe just
baking it.
Baking it and then trying that, which is a really interesting idea.
And then
that
just
we might have
plop
to
it
try.
in.
just plop it.
I'm looking for the first makers to do that.
Plop in the goop and see what happens.
We'll do it. We have a few source.
It just like totally changes the profile of quince on the different, whether you steam it to extract the juice. That's some different options. Do you know the varieties of the quince?
Yes, Smyrna and pineapple are the two that we have.
Okay.
And those are the same ones that the woman who had sold us types. Those are the two that seem to grow really well in our maritime environment.
Oh, this is so exciting.
Yep.
And then the medlars.
Oh, we have an option.
Wait a minute, I want to clap for that. Oh, can you hear the medlars in the background squealing? Okay.
We haven't done anything with medlars yet, but they are on our list.
But a man called us, the same guy who gave us
A medlar man.
A medlar man. I know a guy.
I know a guy, story man. And he calls us and says, I have apples for you. And I'm like, okay. We go out there and we end up picking a whole bunch of northern spy. So we usually we end up doing a lot of the collecting ourselves. But then he shows us this medlar tree. And I'm like, yay! But it wasn't going to be available until November. So sorry.
Yeah.
But there's another term for when it almost goes rotten. And when it blets.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So we missed it this year, but he's on our list for next year.
I think he collected them. I just don't know what he did with them.
Okay. I want to refer people to listen to my episode with Sean Kelly that'll be going live before this episode here, and he does talk about how he manages the medlars, and they're not blooded when he uses them in the cider. We'll follow up on that. I'll let you know after we go offline on how he's doing that. I'm really curious, and I know this just because I've hung out with you and we've traveled, but there's a lot of people out in Ciderville who are working in family businesses or with their significant other or their spouse, and tips for that? How do you do that? Because it isn't always easy, unless that's just part of your personality. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's just part of your personality. But how do you survive that in a business? Because it sounds good on paper, but to actually do that day in and day out, and more often than not, if I'm talking to you on the phone, it's like the two of you are in the car driving or something like that. It's a lot of time together.
So it is a lot of time together, but it's been pretty decent for us. We've been lucky that way. Awareness, I think, is really what it comes down to. It's awareness of each other's strengths, awareness of when you're annoying the other person, which is going to happen, and awareness of when to just detach, right? And we spend a lot of time together because of how our now jobs are so intertwined that we acknowledge each other's strengths. And so when it comes to certain things, a lot of the business, a lot of the decisions in terms of which way the business should go, I usually defer to Ginger because of her experiences. When it comes to things that have to deal with the recipes and the like, it seems to be deferred more towards me. The lavender shop stuff, most of that is Ginger's, and that's an interesting case too because those were two businesses that were value added. The intent originally was for us to have the cidery. Value added was to have the lavender shop there so that people would come in and they could go back and forth between the two. But because the cidery took so long to get started, the lavender business took precedence to get that up and running. And either way, it works out because they are value added to one another. Yeah, I think it's awareness. And
that's a big one. Just asking for awareness sometime can be a big ask.
Yeah, we start each morning. Scott makes the coffee. He's the cook. And he brings the coffee in. We sit down, basically have time to start our day and go over what are the priorities. And we haggle over what the priority is. And we have different sort of priorities in what we want to accomplish. And some of mine are more lavender based, at least right now. And also, I tend to be the amendments girl for the soil and the fertilizer and all of that. So there's some of those things that I will push harder on. So I think what's good is we just nudge back and forth until we come up with an agenda for the day. And sometimes we call it splitting ops. Sometimes we split ops where we're not together.
It's a little of the military.
Yeah, very much.
Of course, because that leads you. Yeah.
But I think we're lucky in that we do work together well. We once, when I told you about D-Day at the beginning, we ended up going to help. We were recruited by a friend of ours who was at the American Embassy in Paris. We ended up hitting the ground up in Normandy, and the Army was working on their air tasking orders. So they were focused on getting all of these helicopters to pick up all these heads of state and drop them off all along the different beaches all over the course. And they were struggling. So Intel girl and pilot guy get in there, and we just basically, they just made room for us, and we got in there, and because of my background and because of Scott's background, we wrote out this air tasking order. And at that point, all these Army folks are looking at us like, you guys are married and you work together? And I think from that perspective, I think we have that at our core. Yes. Do we squabble over things? Is there a back and forth? All of that absolutely is a perfect no. But I think when it comes down to it, we know how to come together and be a good team.
Yeah.
Get things done.
Things done. We had a war room for a while, right? It was our dining room, which was where we had everything up on the walls our first year and a half, I think.
Our friends laughed at us.
But it's nice to keep on envisioning it. I do that in my own office, too. I set a map if I'm planning an itinerary, and the more you look at it, you're connecting the dots over and over again. So it's a visual.
No, very much so.
Yeah, it
very
works.
helpful.
It makes sense, yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. It's been a fun time.
It's been really fun.
In the show notes for this year episode number 409 with Ginger and Scott Wierzbanowski, you'll be able to find all the contact info for Olympic Bluffs Cidery and Lavender Farm and a little bit more, including all the mentions in this here episode, such as Heartland Cider Works, Spacetime Mead and Cider Works, Know Your Roots Orchard Consulting, Rakapak Cidery in Denmark, and Tom Oliver of Oliver's Cider and Perry. And don't forget to check out the upcoming French cider tour to Paris, Normandy, and Brittany this coming September 2024. Find it all at ciderchat.com. And with that, I leave you here. This is Rhea Windcaller signing off for now. Looking forward to seeing you in Ciderville. We drink it like this. There is a reason why we do it like this.
There is a reason why we do it like this. There is a reason why we do it like this. There is a reason why we drink it like this. There is a reason why we do it like this. Yeehaw!